Hi, hallo. My name is Ingrid and I teach Norwegian here at Augustana. When people think about Norway, different things come to mind. Sometimes people think about mountains and dramatic nature, lots of water. Others may think of skiing, cross-country skiing, downhill skiing, lots of snow. Other people may think about the Vikings, and though the Vikings lived a long time ago, they're still very popular. And we know that the Augustana sports teams are called the Vikings. But lots of people think about trolls. This is one of my trolls. And you've likely heard about trolls. Perhaps you've heard the story, the three billy goats gruff. And in the three billy goats gruff, there are three goats, the little one, the middle one, and the big billy goat gruff. And they have a problem. They have to cross this bridge to get to the mountain farm so they can have some good grass and eat during the summer. And the problem is that under the bridge, there's this big, massive troll. And he doesn't want them to go over the bridge, and he wants to eat them. But as you likely remember, the goats trick that troll, and they do away with him, and they go over the bridge, and everything turns out well for them. And this is actually a very typical troll, as we find him in Norwegian fairy tales. A typical troll is very big. It often has a tail or some other unusual feature. It lives in nature. It's very scary and dangerous, but though it's scary and dangerous, it can be tricked. Usually by people, but sometimes by animals, like here. And so even though it's scary, people don't have to worry too much if they use their mind. And I should mention, this troll is so big that it had a nose as long as a broomstick and eyes as big as big dinner plates. So a really unusual looking creature. So you've probably seen some pictures of trolls, and I'm going to show you lots of pictures of trolls today. But an interesting thing to know is that people do not actually believe in trolls. They actually they used them in stories, they had them in stories, but they didn't think they were real. But there were some creatures that people believed in, such as something called the nook and the nisse. And I'm going to tell you about them too. But first, the trolls. So as I said, a typical troll lives in nature. And here you see a mountain, and you can actually see the troll in the mountain. So people used their imaginations, and they were fearful of the dark and the forest. There could be dangerous places, so we can see how the people could imagine trolls in those places. Sometimes trolls lived in forests. This is a Swedish troll, and you see him standing over a house. You see how massive he is. And I love this image, this postcard. Here you see two trolls with their long noses, and a man is crossing over what he thinks is a bridge, but it's actually two troll noses. So he better be careful. And here is yet another troll, a woman who has this very long nose stirring a pot of porridge. So let me show you some other pictures of typical trolls. And many of these are drawings by a man named Theodor Kittelsen. I've already shown you this picture. And though trolls often lived in mountains and in forests, they also lived in the sea. Usually they didn't come out during the day, so this troll is not very typical. You'll notice that there's a sun, and usually a troll would turn to stone, but this troll's doing okay. He's scaring all the people, though, you can see. This is actually in Oslo, in Norway, in the capital city. Here's another trollkärring, or troll woman, stirring a pot of porridge with her very long nose. And they often had sort of grotesque features. Here you have a troll that has four heads, and not very pleasant to look at. Looks very scary. Trolls were also very, very old. Here's a troll who's sitting trying to figure out how old he is. And of course they weren't very bright, so he couldn't remember how old he was. He was actually 600 years old. And trolls were very, very rich. So this is something a lot of people don't realize. Trolls were rich. And here we have a troll family on the way to their gold palace. This is part of another fairy tale. In addition, trolls could be easily tricked. So if you put this all together, you see that it could be a good thing if humans met trolls and they used their minds and their wits, because you could take their treasure. So here we have a troll, and you can see him walking there in the forest, and a young boy running in front of him. He's called the Askelad, and he's holding a sack, and perhaps he's taken the troll's treasure. So though trolls were dangerous to people, they weren't very intelligent, they weren't very smart, and people could often outwit them, and sometimes they got their treasure in exchange. And this final image here, you can see this root, and can you find the troll there? This is a tree stump and the roots of the tree, and if you use your imagination, perhaps you can find a troll there. So as I said, people did not actually believe in the trolls, but they were parts of fairy tales, and people told fairy tales for entertainment. Think about sitting around a campfire. Sometimes you tell scary stories just to scare yourself. But also they taught people lessons and expressed what they wished, what they desired, and so on. People had very hard lives before. So we can understand wanting to tell stories about getting some treasure, winning the lottery. And almost everybody lived out in the countryside as well when these stories were told. They didn't live in cities, they lived in the countryside. And of course, that's where they could imagine the trolls to be. Now, I'm going to tell you about a couple of other creatures that people told stories about, legends. And these are creatures that people actually believed in. And the first one is called the Hulder, or it collected, like the group of beings were called the Hulafoc, and they looked a lot like human beings, except the women had these tails. And they fished and farmed just like human beings, but they could be invisible. And I don't have time to really tell you about them today, but there were lots of stories about them, and they came from somewhere else. They were different from human beings, and people needed to respect them, because if they didn't, things did not go well. And the reason people told these stories and believed in these beings is that it reminded them of the importance of treating outsiders with respect and recognizing that people are different. And so you have to treat people that come from the outside well, because they're people too. We should all be treated equally. So it really, belief in the Hulder taught an important lesson about living together in a community. Here is a Nook. Have you seen Frozen 2? And you've heard about a Nook. And the Nook was a very dangerous creature. The Hulder weren't necessarily dangerous if you respected them, but the Nook was a very dangerous creature, and it took on the shape of whatever you desired the most. So maybe a white horse, could be a white water lily. It lived in the water, and it came out when it was nearing dark at dusk, and what it wanted to do was to lure you into the water. And of course, if you didn't know how to swim, it could cause you big problems. So it was dangerous. Why would people tell this story or these stories? Well, it reminded people of how important it was to be careful around the water, especially at night. So, especially for children, these stories were meant to make them aware that they should be careful by the water. But also, can you think of another reason? It taught the lesson that greed was not a good thing. So it's okay to wish for one Christmas present or a couple of Christmas presents, but to just wish for everything, maybe not the best thing, or to want everything. So it sort of taught a lesson to people. The belief in this reinforced that lesson that greed is not a good thing. But also be careful around the water. And finally, I want to tell you about this little guy. He's called a nisse. Perhaps you've heard of a nisse. Each farm had a nisse, and his job was to take special care of the horses. And keep in mind that before tractors, horses were really important, both to farm the land, but also, so people had enough to eat, but also to get from one place to another. And if you took good care of the nisse and were quiet at night and let him sleep and gave the horse enough food, he was happy, and your farm would be prosperous. But if you didn't if you didn't feed your horse well, and if you were noisy at night, then the nisse might get angry with you and leave the farm, and then you'd have troubles because he wasn't there to help you with the horse. So why did people believe in the nisse? Well, it helped them remember these important lessons. One, that the horse should be treated with respect, and we know that we need to take good care of our animals, but also that it was important to be quiet at night. And if you're going to work hard physically out in the fields every day, you need to get a good night's sleep. The really interesting thing about the nisse is that he's still around today. This is a julenisse, a Christmas nisse. So in Norway, Santa Claus doesn't come to bring presents to kids at Christmas. The julenisse does. And you see him wearing his red cap. He's much smaller than Santa. And instead of leaving him milk and cookies, and some people do leave him milk and cookies, some people leave him special porridge with a big dab of butter in the middle. And that's what people used to leave the nisse on special occasions. They put it out in the barn, in the horse barn, for the nisse. So I hope that you have learned a little bit today, not only about trolls, but also the nook and the nisse. And we can see that why do people tell stories? Sometimes just for entertainment. That's why we tell the troll tales, the fairy tales where there's a troll. We like to scare ourselves sometimes. But other stories that we tell, for example, those about the nook or the nisse, we tell to teach a lesson and to make us aware of how we should behave at times. Okay, that's all I have to tell you today. I want to say takk for nå, thanks for now, and ha det bra, that's goodbye in Norwegian.